today. Congratulations on your documentary, Unbroken.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
More of a congratulations. I guess it's premiering at the Doc NYC 2023. I mean, how do you feel about that?
It's a dream come true. I mean, it feels in many ways like a Broadway premiere. I've been an actor my entire life and always thought that I'd be landing on a Broadway stage. And so here we are with a film, which has an even broader reach. It's very exciting, and we're thrilled to bring this particular story to New York City. It means a lot to me. I lived in New York for over 25 years, and so it's pretty great to bring it back home.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to say at the least that it's a very timely film of what we're actually going through today. And it also comes in a full circle what the family ended up in New York in this story.
Yes. My family, my mother and her 6 siblings, through the help of UNRWA and HIAS and the Joint Distribution Committee in Berlin, as well as the Jewish Children's Bureau of Chicago, came to this country as refugees. They were orphans, and they arrived in New York City and then were taken to Chicago. Chicago was their destination, and where they were then each separated into 7 different foster homes. And everything kind of happens in its own time sequence, but I just happened to attend a panel last Thursday night at Holocaust Museum LA. We actually have a partnership with Holocaust Museum LA, and the panelists were extraordinary. Mark Hetfield of HIAS, and Emiliana, I want to pronounce her name correctly, Wareka, who's the executive director of Women's March Foundation, and Zoe Winkler, who actually founded This Is About Humanity. And This Is About Humanity is an organization here in Los Angeles that takes people, busloads, down to the border so that people can become not only aware of the refugee crisis at the border, but about families that have been separated and how to reunite them together. So our film, although it is told through the lens of the Holocaust, and it is a story about 7 children who survived the Holocaust, it's it's a much bigger conversation that we all need to be having all the time, and what it means to be seeking asylum, what it means to be a refugee, what it means to be a displaced person. I don't even know if we're allowed to use that language anymore. But everybody has a right to live in safety and survive and have a meaningful, wonderful life. And the world is just upside down right now.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Well, let me start with this: what sparked you to do this documentary in the first place?
I first learned about my mother's adoption. She was adopted when I was 6 years old, and that was the same age that she was when she came to this country. And when I learned that she was adopted, my first questions as a 6-year-old were things like, didn't your mommy want you? Of course, then I learned that her mother was murdered at Auschwitz. And I also learned that she had 6 siblings. And I said, well, when do I get to meet them? And she said, you're never going to meet them. They're not in my life. So I think as a 6-year-old, when someone tells you no, you want it more than even if they had said yes. And my mother did reunite with her siblings many, many years later, and I did meet all of them. But for all of those years, I would have these kind of fantasies about meeting them, and who were they, and what did they look like, and did they have children, and what were their lives about? And that was really kind of the first time I started to really explore in my imagination the ideas that are the central root of the film. There was an experience that happened in 2017 when my mother and I went back to Germany, and I realized at that time, it was her first time back to Germany, but I realized that no one was telling this story. I never felt it was mine to tell. I felt it was either hers or her siblings, but it became very, very clear that neither she nor any of her siblings were going to tell this story and make it public. And I just decided in that moment I had to do it. So I was very lucky in that I was enrolled at UCLA in the School of Theater, Film, and Television at the time. I went back to school after my kids went back to college. I decided to go back to college or to get my master's. And that's when I started to make the film. I started knocking on the documentary professor's doors and said, I've got a story to tell. I have to do it. I'm an actor. I'm here for theater, but you've got to let me into your film classes. What do you say? And they did.
Now it's amazing you actually did this stories because first of all, these are very traumatic personal stories of theirs. So how do you make them recollect their memories to basically tell it to you and to be on camera?
I mean, each of my aunts and my mom were very different in the interview process. My Aunt Ruth, may her memory forever be a blessing. We arrived at her house, and before we even walked in, she just launched and started telling stories. And I said, Aunt Ruth, we have to get a microphone on you. We have to set up the cameras, like just save the story, hang on. And we were there for probably a good 4 to 5 hours that day. We did do pickup shots with her again about a year later and had a similar experience, but she knew to wait this time until she had her little microphone on and the clapper went off and things like that. But at the same time, her recollection of sharing these things, and I think she was so happy to get them off her chest, they tormented her. And so my Aunt Ruth, it was just she could share with you, but then the aftermath would be very, very difficult for her. So it got to the point where I wouldn't sprinkle in questions here and there. Whereas my Aunt Gertrude, if I have a question, I just call her up and ask her. Now, if she's having a hard time with what the memories are bringing up for her, she hasn't said so. But we would have to draw things out. And I think her memory wasn't as crystal clear as my Aunt Ruth's. My mom had very few memories because she was so tiny when she came over. She was 3 when they went into hiding, 6 when she came over, and very quickly decided to put her memories behind her and not keep them kind of close to the vest. Each one very, very different. Aunt Renee was different. Aunt Judith, very different. Uncle Alphonse actually wrote out his memories, and his writing is what I use to kind of create my roadmap to just determine even location shoots. Mm-hmm. That was very helpful, having his written document.
Wow. And I was very fascinated with the fact that you included into your documentary your sort of retracing the steps in Germany. Could you tell us about what was that process like and your personal experience?
Sure. I mean, it started with my Uncle Alphonse's document. He wrote this 40-page document for the family in honor of the 50th anniversary of their emigration from Germany to America. And we all got together in 1996 for that celebration. And this document that he gave to all of us took me a very long time to absorb. I remember reading it and having to put it down and just trying to, it's like, he's got a great sense of humor, but it's also very historical and detail oriented. So it's not the easiest read. And it took me years to process it and read it in different ways. But that is how I retraced their steps. I used that as my blueprint. And then also just, I think good investigative kind of research to help us find other places that we might not have known about. And then I have to tell you, this is kind of an incredible, everything happens in its own time sequence and in the right way, that I feel that the world has a spiritual quality that way. In 2018, the farmers who hid my mom and her siblings were honored by Yad Vashem in the Gardens of the Righteous. They were given that commendation as righteous among the nations. And at the ceremony in Jerusalem, there was a lot of press. And the press was published primarily in Israel and in Germany because these farmers are German. And somebody in Munich, actually somebody, his name is Hans Holzheider, but Hans read the article and thought, this is an incredible story. There are very few German couples that are honored at Yad Vashem. There are over 27,000 names. Arthur and Paula Schmidt, the German farmers who hid mom and her siblings, their number 600. So of 27,000 names back in 2018 of righteous Gentiles, there are only 600 names from Germany. And there are all kinds of reasons why that might be. So this journalist who works for one of the best newspapers in Germany, Süddeutsche Zeitung, Hans Holzheider, said, this is remarkable. I'm very interested in this. I'm curious about this. And he pitched the story to his editor saying, I'd like to write about this. And his editor said, oh, you're not just going to write about it. I'm going to send you to Chicago and interview these ladies. So Hans came to Chicago, interviewed mom. And at the time, my Aunt Senta was alive. I started filming when Aunt Senta was in hospice, so I never got her interview, but Hans did. And he wrote this fabulous feature article, printed it in Germany, and now it's all over the papers in Germany, and somebody reads it and mentions it to our now friend, Anna Andlauer, who's an historian in Indersdorf. And she says to her friend, you've got to read this article. I have a feeling that maybe you know about these siblings. Not only did Anna know about them, but she had written about my family in a book that she was writing about the children in Indersdorf. She just didn't know, there aren't that many families of 7 siblings who survived together and emigrated together. As a matter of fact, their photo hangs in the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum as the only family of 7 Jewish siblings known to have survived together and emigrated together. So Anna reads this article, realizes, I wonder if I even have the book with me over here. I don't know if I have it in this office. No. Oh, I'm sad. I don't. I have it in my other. Let me look up there. Hang on one second. Yeah, no, it's in the other office. But so Anna reached out to me, and now she and I start having a conversation. The next thing I know, I have now added to, and this happened many times, I added to my Uncle Alphonse's research, and we wound up going down to Indersdorf for a week. She hosted us and arranged for hotel rooms and dinners and meeting the people in Indersdorf where mom and her siblings were in a cloister that was run by a wonderful Catholic nunnery to house refugee children that were too young to really be in displaced persons camps. Those camps were very dangerous. So they were at this cloister that was specifically for children while they were waiting for all of their paperwork to get organized so that they could then eventually immigrate to this country, to our country.
Wow, it's always the happenstance that it actually.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. Yeah, I just saw Anna, as a matter of fact, in Berlin, and Hans Holzheider. They both drove up from Munich and Indersdorf to Berlin to meet us because we had 9 Stolpersteine bricks laid in Berlin to honor mom, her siblings, and her parents.
Yes. Wow, that is a terrific story. I mean, as someone, I want to say, what, second generation yourself, but were you disappointed that the family has to leave all that German culture and German history behind to make something new here in the United States?
Well, I can't say I was disappointed because it didn't happen to me. I think for them, were they disappointed to leave their culture behind? I think that when you are being persecuted, I can't speak for them, but they each came to this country very happily to leave everything behind because it was so horrible. It was so incredibly, they were so oppressed and persecuted and not treated like human beings. So I think I know that some of my aunts have chosen to go back to Berlin and see what it's like. And others have said, never again. No, I will not go back to a country that was so cruel and horrible to me, even though Germany has done a very commendable job of making reparations. When we went back for the Stolpersteine ceremony in September, the German Senate hosted my mother.
Mm.
Paid for her flight and her hotel and dinners and a concert and things like that. So they are working very hard at reparations. What's happening in the world today is terrifying. And so I think that every country has to really look squarely into their own hearts and decide if they want to be on the right side of history or not.
That is true. That is true. Now, to complete your documentary, you have to use old footage and animation. Could you tell us how you pulled that off for yourself?
Sure. Well, I couldn't have pulled it off without this incredible company out of London called Misfit. Misfit is run by a woman named Melissa Leon, and Melissa and I worked very, very diligently alongside our extraordinary executive producer, Andy Hall from Elastic. And together, along with my editor, Aaron Soffen, the four of us really collaborated to get the animated sequences to really feel like they were born of the film. And I think when you're dealing with current footage, archival footage, and then adding animation, it all has to feel like it's telling the same story. You can't have something that's an outlier. And I think that we did it very successfully. I'm very pleased that we chose to use animation as a way to retell pieces of either exposition that needed more clarity or some of the more character-driven things that we didn't have interviews of or footage of. And you have 80-year-old, 90-year-olds telling stories about when they were little kids.
Yeah.
So they're remembering decades and decades previously. And I think that the animation really allows us to see this story through the lens of children. So I'm very, very happy that we chose to use that element. And in archival, I tried to really limit our archival as much as possible because I didn't want the film to feel like here's a whole bunch of interviews and here's a whole bunch of old footage. I wanted it to feel like you are experiencing their journey. So the times that we use the archival footage, it's placed in a way, it's placed in the film in a way that I hope does not take anybody out of their experience of putting themselves inside the shoes of these 7 children.
Now, I love how you ended the film, particularly, tracing everyone and considering everyone family. Do you still constantly keep in touch with the rest of the family, even though, I know you with your aunts and so on, but like everyone else too?
I mean, as best we can. It's over, it's so many people. And we have a big giant email list. I did invite every single member of our family last November, so a year ago, to Chicago, so they could see. We had a private screening just for family, so they could see where we were at that time and with the film. We had a final cut. We had a different title. We had a family reunion. It was wonderful. And so now they have to see the movie again because we've recut it, we've retitled it. Not that much has changed, but so much has changed. But the bones and the structure of the film are all still exactly the same. We did not cut any animation. But I just felt that because we were coming up against my aunts in their 80s and 90s, if I waited for us to have our world premiere, which we just had on October 8th in Indianapolis at Heartland International Film Festival, I might lose them. And in fact, we did. We lost my Aunt Ruth last May. So it was really important to me to try and get the family together so they could see the film as quickly as we were able to. And they all know how to find me.
That is great to hear, Beth. One last thing. I've taken a lot of your time already, but as audiences have more chances to watch your film down the road, What is the one most important thing that you hope they walk away with after viewing Unbroken?
Thank you for asking that
Thank you for
question.
asking that question.
I think it's
I
very,
think
are you guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt for our interview for one moment. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm hearing myself repeating myself over and over again. Are you getting that?
Not getting the feedback.
Okay, all right. I think it's gone away though now. Um, if people leave Unbroken with one thing in mind, it is that as human beings, we have to always remember that that is what we are. We are human beings. We belong on the planet. Everybody deserves to have a place on the planet. And the conversation, at least for me, has nothing to do with politics or religion or land. It has to do with the fact that we are a species and we have a right to be a species alongside other human beings. So no matter what you feel about what somebody looks like or how they pray or what they do with their money or how they've raised their kids, who knows? You have to take the time to listen to each other. And you have to remember that that other person's experience is just as valuable as your own experience. And how can you be in conversation? I think that we are also overwhelmed by everything that's happening in the world, whether it's a humanitarian crisis or the environment, or gosh, the list goes on and on and on. And we feel like apathetic because what can I do? I'm just one person. I can't take on this topic. But that's actually not true, because if we each did one small thing every day, it would have a ripple effect. And if we believe in hope, I believe that hope is the strategy, and it's not naive. It's actually, I am invested in making sure that all the DNA in my cells are receiving just goodwill and hope instead of being depressed and terrorized and you know, we can all do something. And this is not to say that people that are going through just the most horrific crisis right now, that they of course have the right to feel all the terror and all the fear that they are experiencing because they are being persecuted at this moment. But we still have to believe in just whatever little beacon of light, whatever little beacon of hope there is, because somebody will be an upstander, and that person just might be you. And you might not realize how magnificent your small, tiny gesture could mean to somebody else. So let's just take the time to be human, to listen to each other, and to make sure that we are participating in making the world a better place and not just standing on the sidelines.
Well said. Well said. I mean, your documentary demonstrates that with the goodwill of a lot of people who saved your family during that time. And Beth, I just wanted to let you know my favorite part of the film is when your mother found out about her middle name.
Oh, it's a good one, right?
That was,
Don't tell.
I know that I just wanted to say how that all came about was just pure magic.
Oh,
That was a beautiful moment, and I'm so glad that that was a moment you got to share with your mother. That was terrific.
thank you so much. Thank you. It is definitely one of my favorites also. And I think it's those little things like that that when people can relate to that, then they'll realize that they also can do something like that for somebody in their family or their neighborhood.
Most excellent. Well, thank you very much, Beth. I can't wait for the whole world to see your film Unbroken, and thank you for carrying this conversation with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.